there's almost no feeling like discovering a brand new area in a Metroidvania game. Other games can't quite replicate that unique experience of broadening your map and inching your way screen by screen toward an unknown destination. A new area also means time to gain unique abilities, confront challenging enemies, and, of course, hear some new music. Needless to say, music has always been one of my favorite aspects of video games. And that tiny rush when hearing the first notes of a new level theme, and the joy in listening to it unfold over time. Though soundtracks are enjoyable on their own, they also contribute to the game as a whole. A compelling area or level theme lends character to a space, and gives the player something to attach a memory to. A great example of this comes from the grandfather of platformers itself. When you hear these 6 notes, you know exactly the game and level it's from, right down to those orange platforms and blue bricks. Chiptune aside, contemporary games also strive for this recognizability in their level themes. Blasphemous 2 is a Metroidvania of ambitious size, featuring over 16 areas with unique themes. Each musical piece should stand out from one another, and bonus points if it's easily recognizable and grabs your attention so that you remember it when you return to that area. So where to begin when composing a theme like this? Looking back at Super Mario for inspiration, we want to start each piece with a strong musical idea or motif. Think about how the chorus of a popular song is typically the most memorable part, how it leaves the strongest impression or stands out more from the rest. Video game music and film scores don't typically have choruses per se, but there's still this idea of strong musical patterns meant to grab the listener's attention. By placing such sections at the start of a piece, we'll see how they can make an area theme more effective. Let's illustrate by breaking down the theme to Crown of Towers, an area I spent way too long in because my dumbass forgot you could use the weight of sin to destroy these vertical walls. Let me tell you, I was feeling quite profundo lamento about it until I figured it out. Anyway, here's the theme. I love how this theme throws us right into the action. We've got a simple melody outlined on an alto guitar and another guitar and bass strumming the lower chords. The notes played across the bass instruments are B, D, and F sharp, which, with some chordal analysis, we know is the tonic chord of the key of B minor. The tonic is repeated for 2 more measures before we jump to the major dominant chord, the 5th, comprised of F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. The next 12 measures repeat this pattern, and a soprano guitar is added to thicken the alto guitar's melody. The harmony is only altered in the last 2 measures, where we hear the dominant chord instead. This 1-5-1 progression is as traditional as it gets, and there's not much else going on harmonically. But there's something else happening here. And notice how the beats of the bass guitar don't align with those of the other instruments. This is what's known as syncopation. And throwing in the dominant chord every 4th measure lends to a subtle asymmetry in the harmony, which is emphasized by the piece's fast tempo. Let's compare the piece to a version I composed, which attempts to make the rhythms in harmony more quote-unquote symmetrical. First, let's hear the original again. And now the altered version. It just sounds kind of not bad, but much worse. The asymmetry adds so much character and momentum to this piece that removing it kills the whole thing. More involved melodies and chord progressions manifest later on, though they follow a similar harmonic pattern established in the first 4 measures. Take a listen. So the 2 key takeaways from this piece are 1, how well it catches our attention as listeners, and 2, how quickly it establishes strong harmonic and rhythmic motifs which are used throughout the track. As soon as we hear those initial 4 measures, we have a solid first impression of the theme and are excited to hear the rest. Now, it might be tempting to apply this technique to all game soundtracks. I mean, let's just start all of our level themes with a strong melody or progression, right? But that's not really the case, even for games within the same genre. Take Ori and the Will of the Wisps, another indie-developed game in the Metroidvania family. Its area tracks often have long cinematic intros before getting to the real meat of each piece. That's because you're repeatedly dying and respawning in these areas while you battle enemies and solve environmental puzzles. The music plays continuously, so there's no need to jump right off into the exciting stuff. The composers match the pace of the music to that of the gameplay, and it works splendidly. But screw saving the forest, let's go back to murdering undead Catholic horrors. We want to start our track strong and draw our players right into the action. Crown of Towers does just that with its ensemble of guitars and dramatic, syncopated rhythm. But a strong start doesn't have to be so aggressive. Plenty of pieces in Blasphemous 2 have a more mellow introduction, while still drawing the listener in. Take the sacred Entombments as an example, with its eons of dust and men of stone. This theme is somber for sure, but it also conveys something powerful and ancient. It aptly captures the history of the location, a monastery that collapsed beneath the manifest sin and guilt borne by its confessor, Rodimus. Let's see how it achieves this through some harmonic analysis. Note that based on the way the piece loops, it's more intuitive to start our analysis at the 5th measure. The opening chord of G sharp, B, and D sharp sets us up for the key of G sharp minor, though this D sharp held on the organ for several measures subverts the tonic, making this chord sound almost like the dominant. The second chord of D sharp, G sharp, and A sharp again sounds almost like our D sharp major dominant, but the tonality is subverted, this time by the G sharp, which really should be an F. Moving the third up a step like this creates a suspended 4th chord, or more generally a suspended chord, abbreviated SUS. The resulting chords are dissonant, though not altogether unpleasant. The motif in the piano repeats, and these tonally ambiguous chords seem to push and pull the tonality without ever quite resolving it. There's a sense of melancholy for sure, but also mystery and tension. This piece beckons, it entices. What buried secret waits to be uncovered here? Our organ begins to ascend toward the G sharp minor root. At the same time, our repeating melodic pattern, well, it repeats. Here it's less useful to analyze the pattern and the other notes together. Rather, we'll interpret them as separate harmonies, like so. Eventually, we do arrive at a clean tonic chord, giving us a sense of resolution, but it's brief, and we quickly are swept into new harmonies. When another melody arrives, played on cellos, things get even more crazy. We hear D sharp, F double sharp, and A sharp in the melody and bass, which is actually our major dominant chord. And this is followed by an E major chord, the submedian of our key, then the dominant again, minor this time, and at last back to the tonic. Though entirely different from Crown of Towers, the theme for Sacred Entombments is just as compelling. The harmonies are rich and varied, and the slow, heavy organ complements the ascending piano motif perfectly. Even though the piano repeats notes from the tonic chord, we're withheld any true feeling of resolution. Despite the centuries, the guilty souls of this monastery are still without peace. Having these area themes start with strong ideas is essential for a game like Blasphemous 2. Not only does it match the pacing of the action, but it establishes a unique identity for each area. When I hear that energetic intro to Grills and Ruins, or that eerie ascending scale of Two Moons, as something clicks in my brain and there's a flash of recognition. Even the theme to Choir of Thorns with its haunting, screeching strings gives that feeling of, oh yeah, this place again. In my video for the soundtrack of the first Blasphemous game, I critiqued that its area themes aren't as iconic as they need to be, and sometimes sound too similar to one another. Thankfully, I never had that problem with Blasphemous 2. Even between some of the more arguably similar themes, I could always pin each piece to its respective area. I'm psyched that Carlos Viola preserved so much of that flamenco style and musical identity of the first game while tweaking the soundtrack to suit the game's genre even better. And kudos to this huge cast of musicians. It really inspires me to see that indie games get such high production value when it comes to music. Speaking of production value, all of Blasphemous 2 is brimming with it. The boss fights, the fantastic cutscenes, the more varied ways to explore the world, even the way the lore and story are delivered is so much tighter, more satisfying and connected. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a video on the story and themes of Blasphemous 2. It wouldn't be a deep lore dive, but more of a story analysis like I've done in my Bug Fables and Rainworld videos. Oh, and before I go, do check out some of the live performances of the soundtrack by the game's musicians. It's quite a treat. There's a link to the channel in the video description. That's farewell for now, though hopefully not for long. Stay penitent, fellow sinners, and may the miracle be merciful.